This episode is sponsored by the Pisgah Coaching Institute, founded by IFS-trained Master Coach Brian Jadad, who has been a pioneer in the integration of IFS and coaching for more than 2 decades. Brian and his faculty teach a blended methodology for clarifying and living into a vision. Enrollment is now open for his 2025 training. To learn more, go to pisgahcoaching.com. That is PISGAH coaching.com.
Hey everyone, I'm Tammy Sollenberger, the author of The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about who they are, the different parts of themselves, and for those who want to connect with their true self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey everyone, welcome. I'm glad you're here. We are re-releasing an episode I did with Chris Burris back in 2020 on inner critics and attachment. If you know Chris Burris, he is a lead trainer with the IFS Institute, and I just have this feeling that he is one of those beloved teachers. He was my level 1 teacher, and so I think I have a special spot for him. But I also think that a lot of people do. So I was excited to re-release this episode. So we're in between season 5 and starting season 6 in the fall, and we are super excited about that. Season 5, we hit 1 million downloads, which is super exciting. And so we are gearing up for season 6. But in the meantime, I like to take, if you've been around for a while, you know that I like to take the summer off podcasting. But with Jeff's help, Jeff is my co-producer, and with his help, we decided let's put out a few episodes that include some of our favorite guests and are just all-time ones that I know that you like because I see the numbers. And so I know this is one that lots of people like. So here we go. I think this is a great episode. And yes, we talk about critics and attachment, but we talk about so many other things. In the original show notes, I say grab a pen, but because that's how I felt. I was like, yeah, this episode is full of Chris's wisdom. He's just an amazing teacher. And so it feels like you get to sit beside him and learn from him. So do that. Pull up a chair, sit beside Chris and I as we talk, and you get to learn. And I hope you're having a good summer. Take care. I know you travel the world training, and then do you have a private practice too that you have an office to, or do you just do online stuff?
I have an office and I do online stuff. But yeah, I see clients. I still really do a lot of trauma work, and so I do it online. I have clients also come to my office here, but I've stayed pretty steeped and working. I've worked with trauma for my whole career, 25 years now almost. But I still see a lot of really pretty severe trauma work. And, so still, kind of where my love is working, doing trauma work.
And was it through your interest in working in trauma that you found IFS?
Yeah, I studied a parts model by a gentleman named David Kaloff, who was sort of an early trauma specialist. And I worked at a United Family Services, and probably within 6 months of me taking a job, 85% of my cases were cases of sexual abuse. And so David was coming in and teaching us to do trauma work. And his model's a parts model, one of the early parts models. He and Dick and Mike Elkin were all sort of presenters at the networker conference, and they were in a study group together. And so I think Dick kind of learned a good bit of parts work from David, but back then it was really kind of using, parts work to work with dissociative identity disorder. And David was starting to apply a bit of that to everybody. I think Richard Schwartz, or Dick, took a lot of David's work and just really organized it and developed it and listened to the clients and did a beautiful job of really kind of teasing the model out, from different places. But yeah, I studied with David probably 10 years before I met Dick. And so
David's still around? What is he doing?
David's still around. He's written a book, and he's in Seattle, and I don't think he's sort of touring as much anymore, but yeah, he's a beautiful guy.
So you got in early on.
I did. I did my first training in 1999 and PA'd in 2001 and was assistant trainer by, I think it was assistant trainer in 2003, and then I was a co-lead for, I liked co-leading a lot. I co-led with Karen Bashir's, who was a leader trainer at the time. So Karen and I trained together in Asheville. We ran a lot of IFS trainings here, and so I really love co-leading. Co-leading doesn't pay anything, so you can't stay as a co-leader. But I did that for 5 or 6 years. And then I think 2010 was my first solo lead training, and so then I've been kind of doing a lot of it since then.
How do you balance out like the trainings that you do with your family? And because I know you have 2 young kids.
Yes, challenging. I was away too much in the past 5 or 6 years. I traveled way too much, so it's a bit of a challenge to balance everything. And my daughter's a senior in high school, so I'm trying not to travel very much this year. And maybe she might do a gap year and hang around next year, so I might not travel much next year either if she does a gap year and hangs out here a little bit.
Do you have is there a part of you that has an opinion about what she should do?
I think she shouldn't be a therapist. But no, I don't.
Wait, why?
I don't know. I think it's a challenging job. It's a difficult job. It's not. I mean, it requires a lot of growth on our part, but we carry a lot. I used to say, we hear the worst stories imaginable, on a daily basis. So we have to learn not to absorb those things and not carry them. I think IFS really helps. In my early years, by Friday I was a zombie, because I just absorbed everything, and I had to learn, and I had vulnerable parts that absorbed everything, and I had young teenagers that was working hard to fix my mom, so those parts were working hard too. So by the time even though I had I came along with a parts model, by the time I got to IFS, I was burned out, and I was really fried. I'd had a year where I had shingles and was in bad shape by the time I find IFS. And then I discovered these parts of me that were absorbing my clients' feelings, and I was feeling my clients' feelings, and I was overworking, and I had parts of ruminating about trying to help my clients, so everybody was working way too hard. Yeah. And that was part of the burnout. And, so I don't feel that way anymore. I feel refreshed and energized, and I sort of stay in my own energy bubble, and, and I don't feel my clients' feelings, that's commiserating. That's not compassion. So yeah, I mean, for me, I wouldn't be a therapist anymore. I don't think if I hadn't found IFS. I think I'd be selling insurance, or maybe installing cabinets,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Selling insurance would not be, that's horrible.
Oh, anything was feeling better than every way I was doing it.
Okay, well, that's pretty bad then. You're like, insurance would be better. Yeah. So then how do you, I have 2 thoughts about that. One is that there's this thing that's been happening to me recently that I thought it's really curious. It's like when I'm sitting doing therapy, it's like the sad, horrible stories don't land on like younger parts of me. Mm-hmm. But I have a friend who's a special ed teacher, and this has happened twice, where we were at like a pizza party with all of our kids, and she has told me like a horrific story involving a young child, and I'm like sitting there with like wine, and it's almost like I have no protection. Mm-hmm. And I've been thinking, and then like it almost like hits me, like she's telling me this, and my eyes are wide, and I can feel it. I can feel that I'm being super affected by this horrible story she's telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually happened twice, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think of it I think of it a little bit like, what you think that is cute. What you have is, you're at a party, your parts are kind of out celebrating with you,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit like you might not tell that story if you're in the car with your children.
Right.
Because your children are listening. So your parts are there celebrating and partying with you, and they're listening to it. And I think it's recognizing like, hey, like, I can't listen to this story right now. Like my kids, my inner kids are like, they're,
Yeah.
and a little bit, there's a little bit like that, like even sort of like on Saturdays, my wife will ask me something like, we've been trying to write some, and like, do you want to write? And I'm like, no, my teenagers are way too active to want to write today. They don't want to sit down and write. My teenagers never want to sit down and write. They want to be out, playing, so now my inner parts are way too, they're like, they want to like listen to music and, have some fun.
And that's one of the things I think that makes this idea of multiplicity amazing, and to help us really understand, like, why is there times that I can actually wrap my head around writing or wrap my head around this horrible story or be present and compassionate, and there are other times when I can't. And there's plenty of times when I'm like, I can't even think about my schedule. But then there's other times when I'm like, no problem, and I'm like taking care of it. It makes a ton of sense. It depending on what parts are up.
Yeah.
The energy that I'm in and the urges and desires that I'm having.
Yeah, I think so. I think it helps us a lot, because we all have these, and we're, part of our docket a little bit was talking about critics, but we all have these parts of ourselves that try to help us, but they've learned to do it in a harsh way, and because that kind of works. But, so because of what you're describing, Tammy, is different times we're in certain different modalities, and we could have a critic that gets hard on us because, why can't I focus? Well, it's Saturday and I'm not supposed to focus. Like your little guy, he's running around. He's not focused. It's not school.
Right.
It's
the Tylenol's kicked in.
Yeah, the Tylenol's kicked in. He's ready to have some fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting you said that, because I thought what happens is there is a critic that says I should be able to handle that story, and she doesn't have anyone else. This is probably maybe like a people pleaser or have to be everything to everybody part that says she doesn't have anyone else to talk to. Like she can't tell the story to the stay-at-home mom that's sitting right there. You know what I mean? Like she only has. So I should listen. And I should be able to handle it.
Yeah. So that should is a real good indicator that you got a critic working. Yeah. Critics are masters at shoulds. And should is a fear, so should's a fear-based response. And that's, so until the critics, and maybe we'll talk a little more, critics can transform. They don't have to be critics. They don't have to be critics forever, but these parts tend to be major players in our system, and they tend to try to help us meet the ideal aspects of ourselves. So there are parts of ourselves that sees the discrepancy between maybe how we are as human beings and how we are ideally. Okay. And so they stay a bit focused on our ideal self, and they've learned to use harshness or fear to try to help us reach our ideal. So what you're describing is, ideally, this is who I should be, and it's trying to help you meet that ideal, with having a should in there, which the rest of our system starts to respond to a should, because a should is sort of it's a bit of a shame-based response. If I don't meet this, then somehow I fail, which is a fear, the fear of failing. So that's a system that works really well to motivate us to try to meet our ideals. I mean, the challenge for the critics is they don't know that we actually aspire to be a better aspects of ourselves, and the inspiration is more quiet. It's not as loud as fear, but everybody carries it. Everybody, like as Dick says, that self energy carries a motivation, towards health and wholeness, and so we have a natural motivation in our system for it. If you watch kids naturally want to learn. That this just needs to be fun for them, and we've lost like how to make, school wasn't much fun for me, but when we're having fun, the natural state of learning is having fun, so there's a natural internal motivation that the critics they just haven't learned to trust that,
Yeah. So it's like they think, well, I'm just going to hammer you more. And that's what will motivate you. And that's what will make you the ideal self. It's just more louder, more critical, more energy, more intensity.
Yeah, absolutely. And some reason my critic, it kind of mimicked my football coach. And I, once I started working with it, I'm like, you sound a lot like my football coach, and it's like, he was the one, one of my partners was saying to me, he's the one that really got you to be tough. He's the one that got you to really perform higher than you ever thought you could, and I'm like, yeah, but he was an asshole, so why do you want to mimic him? It worked, and that's, so the parts are, they kind of mimic someone that maybe that kind of worked, or someone that seemed to have power or influence, and they didn't tend to mimic other people that actually was empowering, so that's a lot of my work is that the belief that really these critics can transform. They have just formed a poor way of helping us, but the way they helped us is actually works. It actually has helped save our lives, or helped us be successful, or, helped us be more organized, or helped us be different than a family member that we didn't want to be like, so there's kind of a lot at stake. So fear is it's a high energy motivator, but it's exhausting. So,
yeah. Well, and it has other responses from other parts. There's other.
Exactly right.
But then when those critics transform with self energy and going to what they're protecting, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
What younger parts they're protecting.
Yeah, I think the process that I'm, noticing a bit is, one is they have to be introduced so they actually could do it differently.
Okay. Yeah.
They don't know it because it's, like if something works all the time, but it has, consequences, as you just said, it's hard to sort of give up something that works, even if you have something that works better. So that's a bit of a hard transition. So the first phase is to introduce that there is another way, and then to kind of help the part experience another way, and then to see, as you just indicated, how other parts of the system respond to that. Because the critic tends to produce shame, and it tends to make the younger parts feel bad, and then they kind of shut down or withdraw. And then the critic has to hammer them more, to try to, sort of like to get them to pop up, but they don't pop up. They tend to go deeper into the shame, and it becomes a vicious cycle that gets locked into.
I like that thinking though sometimes. So sometimes I think like to transform a part, let's say like transform the critic, that you have to do the whole protocol. But it's like, wait, if I just introduce this idea that there's another way, and letting that part see that other parts are reacting, that it's actually producing shame, that could actually that could be so transformative.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of where and oftentimes the critic has a myopic view. It's not. It sees the outcome. It sees like, okay, when I hammer you, you do get your paperwork done. And all us therapists struggle with that.
Right.
It's a common theme. But it doesn't really see that. But when I do that, you feel really bad about yourself. and you feel, like a terrible therapist, which then makes you feel bad later, and doesn't sort of see the outcome of it. So that's why we sort of refer to these parts kind of like firefighters. They don't see the destruction that they're creating.
Yeah, and I was thinking that when my critic starts hammering at me about a mistake that I've made, or I didn't do something right, or I should be the kind of person, or that, if I was a good friend, I'd listen to my friend, then that triggers shame, and then that triggers behaviors that I don't really like, whether it's sleeping too much or eating too much, or that triggers another firefighter to kind of calm it all down.
Yeah, which amps up the critic again. This is a horrible, vicious cycle.
Oh, heavens to Betsy. Yeah.
We're all walking around with these vicious cycles that we can't figure out how to get out of. So we look at a lot of our clients are coming in, because of this vicious cycle that they're trapped into. They can't get out of it. So I like to try to work with critics. I sort of teach, see if you can at least kind of help the critic soften, early in the work. And I do it a little differently that way, because if you think about normal family therapy, if you've got like 4 or 5 family members sitting in a room together, and one of them is really mean or harsh, you're not going to ask the rest of the family to get vulnerable, because they're going to get beaten up, So you're gonna start with safety, but you're going to work with the harsh member of the family to find out why they're harsh and why they feel like they need to do that, and what they're hoping to accomplish, and how is this protective, and and if they could figure out another way to protect people without being harsh, would they be interested in that? So we would do that in normal family therapy, and somehow we think we can work our internal system and bypass that member, and that member won't cause repercussions. So that doesn't make sense in family therapy. So the common sense is to work with that critic first and create an internal safety in the system, and we may have to work a bit more with the vulnerable parts, before that part's willing to shift a whole lot, but at least it can mitigate itself a little bit just by introducing this idea that you don't have to be harsh to get your point across here.
Yeah. I love that. And actually, I was just thinking how often maybe parts of me don't like the critic in my patient, right? Sort of don't like that part. And then I want to bypass, be like, okay, and the person doesn't like that part. So I'm sort of, my part's joining with their part, not liking the critic. And then I'm like, okay, well, no, we want to talk about your anxiety, right? So let's talk about you're anxious about this thing. So then I don't want to talk about the critic, but then the critic keeps coming in, and then we don't get to talk about the anxiety or whatever that is.
Yeah. David would always say, we're all pretty happy to work with the warm, cuddly parts, but those mean ones, we all want to shy away from. So yeah. But I think that's a natural tendency to do that.
Yeah, and I'm also feeling like, man, if we could get the critic with all that great energy to shift a little bit,
yeah,
that would make a huge difference in the system.
Exactly. I think that's why I say critics are major players, because they're, my critic's he's this part's much more soft and gentle. It's like yesterday, I have a client coming to my office today, and my desk was just really messy. And my part says, your desk's looking kind of messy is just not going to give a great impression, and when I do video work, no one can see it, but it was really nice about it. It's not going to give a great impression, and, why don't we just tidy it up a little bit, and you'll be happy with it.
Wow.
But it's a major player, but it's like, that's really nice the way you're talking to me. It's like, like you're right. And I got my desk really tidy, and it looks really pretty, and, but then that's the reinforcement piece, it's when the parts kind of do help you in the way that you've asked them to help, then you have to reinforce that, by responsiveness to them. And for me, it's it's a bit of a daily. It's like a relationship. A relationship needs reinforcement. And if you neglect a relationship for months and months and months, the other person's not going to be really happy with you.
Right. Yeah.
And, and so it's, especially if there's a commitment that you've made in the relationship. So you've made this commitment with the part, to have this ongoing relationship. So you have to sort of follow up with it, by actually listening to it when it does do things in a way that you've asked it to do that. So you can't neglect your internal system and expect it to stay in harmony.
Yeah, that is such a good point, that it's like you can go to therapy or training or something, and you could learn about your system, and then you can make these, and I've done this before, like made a commitment. Yep, I'm making a commitment to check in with this part. Then life gets busy, blah, 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 blah. Then all of a sudden the part comes back up and is even more agitated or whatever. And it's like, oh, why? I thought I worked with this part. And it's like...
Right. That's when we say this therapy doesn't work.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about another issue that I'm having that I think is about attachment, which is, I know that one of the things that we wanted to talk about. So the other issue that I'm having is, and there's a part of me that feels like this is really silly. This is a silly issue.
Is that a critic that sort of tells you that?
Yeah, this is silly. He's going to think you're stupid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's that part not to be so harsh.
Okay.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, I could actually feel my shoulders just like droop down a little bit.
Yeah, because it relaxes a bit.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. That feels good.
Yeah.
So here's and it's an ongoing issue that I have. So say, my friend, at that party, right? The pizza party with all the kids and all that stuff, and say I have a really good conversation with Sally. So then I think, say there's a Friday, and then Sally and I have a really good conversation, and then I don't hear from her. There's a part of me that then expects Sally and I are now going to be best friends, and she's going to text me, and then I don't hear from her. I'm like, well, that's weird. So I might text her, like kind of keeping that like connection or intensity of like, we talked on Friday and we had this amazing connection. On Monday, I might be like, how's your week? What's going on? And she might just give me a like, hey, I hope you have a great week. I'll see you in a few weeks. And I'm like, wait, see you in a few weeks? No. Like we just had this connection and now we're not going to talk for a few weeks. That feels weird for me. And I've learned that that's like normal, and like not to do that to people, because it happens to me all the time where I'm at church or I'm at school and people like talk to me like we're best friends, and then there's no other, and then I feel like, wait, I thought I don't know, and I feel like maybe this is the credit, it feels like it's strange that I'm like, oh, we're just going to have this maybe once a month really fantastic conversation, and that's going to be it. That's
yeah. So from an attachment lens, so what we might look at a little bit is that so that object constancy, that constancy of, that you're going to be there, and I know you're going to be there, and you're not going to go away. That's a developmental need for when we're really young, that we sort of need that object constancy, and so if somehow that gets disrupted and we don't trust it, then there's parts of us sort of still playing that out, and it gets played out in lots of different arenas, and so so looking at, so what we would do, if you're doing work and attachment work, is we might look at those parts that didn't get the consistency of that constancy, and is looking for that, and the great thing about with IFS is now you're able to be the constant for the part, and it's not sort of looking for that, everywhere else. And then in what you said, and there's some part of you that knows, like, okay, so this come close, go away is normal. and different people have different levels of engagement, and there's some people that they engage once a month, and that's the nature of their close friendships. And some folks engage every 2 hours, and that's the level of their engagement, but different people have different levels of engagement, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's the sum total of the quality of the relationship. So some part of you sort of knows that, there's this other part of you that's really looking for that constancy, that consistent figure, that maybe somehow got interrupted some way.
And I know my childhood, and so that actually makes a ton of sense. Mm-hmm. And I was also thinking about that I had a security object for a long time, like a security blanket sort of thing for a really long time. My parents are divorced, yada, yada, yada. So I was like, yeah. And so that actually makes a ton of sense. And the other thing that's kind of funny to me is there's another part of me that's like, I don't want all these friends. Like, I don't want to be, I don't want to be friends. It's this confusion.
Yeah.
Like, why we have this intense conversation, and then so it's almost, that's
sort of the other side of that inconsistent, parenting, is it another protector, that's kind of the way that your parts may have compensated for it, is I want it, but then I don't want it, because it hurts too bad to want it and to not get it. So the parts sort of develop a bit of these patterns around, longing for it, but then being angry and or they might move to self-reliance, or they might move the anger, because, the figure isn't constant with them, so can be multiple layers to that, which gets a little confusing, because you've got, in IFS, we talk about a polarization, a part that wants this closeness, another part that, has sort of convinced itself it doesn't want it to compensate for whatever hurt that happens when people go away. So you have different, parts have different sort of attachment wounds and different ways of compensating for that, which is quite normal for children to adjust, to those dynamics. So the little parts carry those early dynamics that got set up.
Yeah. And how do people? And I think that's one of another gift of IFS is the idea of self. Then can be that like repairer of the attachment wounds that happened when you were little.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it goes both ways. I think the misnomer that people hear about IFS is I got to be everything for myself. This is what IFS is saying, and that's sort of not true. It's relationships are highly important, and an attachment, to our spouses or to our significant others or to our children, that these relationships are highly important. So no one is saying that you're supposed to be solo independent, but the self just takes care of ourselves.
Like all I need is self.
All I need is self. And, and they're not saying that at all. It helps to have, an internal dynamic that's self-soothing, self-calming, and that we can listen and befriend ourselves and care for these aspects of ourselves. And then we can negotiate those relationships, but there is some soothing, at least we kind of know what's going on, and we may be able to kind of heal that, so it's not quite so extreme, or it doesn't jump into the driver's seat, but we can also, then we have a self-leadership to negotiate it, like one of my friends, he likes to be, he's one of those, like, we could talk every hour and he would be happy with that, and we would sort of process all of our stuff with each other, and that's not me. I'm I'm the one that, if we talk once a week, I'm pretty happy, and so we had to negotiate, the level of our engagement, but I could sort of do that from a self-led part. Like if we're going to be really good friends, like I know that you're like a lot of engagement. I'm a little bit more introverted than you. You're extroverted. Or we're going to have to kind of find a balance here of engagement that feels right to both of us, and how about we talk about this? This relationship's important to the both of us. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what feels, like the right amount, and, I can't sort of process all of your relationship issues with you. That's not me, right. I can process a little bit with you, but every time we have breakfast, I can't hear about your girlfriend issues. That's, it's like, like we got to talk about something else, and maybe you want to hire a therapist for that, but so but the negotiation comes from a self-led way, which is around how are we going to cooperate and how are we going to be in relationship to each other, and then what do we know about each other? What do we know about our own internal system?
Right, because it's like if you are saying that to him and he has some attachment wounding that is a part that's just really, I'm kind of doing a grabby thing with my hand, sort of like I don't want to say needy because that sounds judgmental, but sort of is really needing for you to be that security object, maybe.
Yeah.
So then if what you're saying lands on that part, then that's, so I guess what I'm trying to say is this is where our attachment wounds and our external relationships meet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Does that make sense? So that
absolutely.
If I'm being there for my parts that need that consistency, then in self is being there for them and with them and being in the consistent object for them, then they aren't going to be as needy to grab it from my external relationships. So then I can show up differently in my external relationships.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right? That's sort of that how that attachment stuff actually comes into your, like how it applies to your external relationships. That's important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's more clarity in the relationship. There's more, like he can say, I know that I have parts that have a lot of high interpersonal needs, but it doesn't have to come from you. I can, like my friend has he's extrovert. He has lots of friends, he has a very intimate relationship with his wife. He has lots of places for those high relational needs to get met. And so he
does he have a wife and a girlfriend?
No. Oh yeah, just two different friends. Sorry.
Well, this sounds very exciting.
Yeah, I'm sort of combining these two friends.
That's
one of them has a girlfriend, one of them has a wife. So I have two high needs friends.
Kind of interesting, Chris.
Thanks for clarifying about that. But you have sort of that, for him to be able to negotiate to know what his internal needs are, then he can navigate those with his system.
What about this idea, and I've heard this in sessions where it's like, well, I didn't get my needs met from my mom, and so I can't go back and do that now. Like that idea of like, well, my mom wasn't there for me, so what am I supposed to do about that now? This isn't, so this isn't helping talking about this. And so, how do you handle that when people say that?
Well, yeah, I think that we have parts that are really trying to complete what they weren't able to complete as children. So if I could figure out a way for my mom to be there for me, in the way I wish she could have back then, then everything would be so much better. And it's it's challenging when parents don't have those skill sets, to be able to be there in that way.
Yeah. It's interesting we say that in relationships too, right? Sort of this word that I like that way you just said that we're trying to complete. So then like say my dad was an alcoholic and so then I end up marrying an alcoholic and then it's like, why do I keep picking the same type of men? And it's the idea, right? It's that your parts are trying to complete something or that looking for redemption or trying to redeem your parent.
Yeah.
Which is attachment issue. It's attachment wounds, right?
Yeah. There's something actually Freud talked about is that, then the MAGA folks talked about it is that we tend to find someone that's going to bring up our unfinished business but also has the potential to heal it. So there's also that potential to heal in that person. And that's kind of what attracts us to them, is the potential to heal it. And sometimes people, they do their work and that potential to heal is there. I think what IFS brings is that actually someone else can't heal your internal wounds. That it really takes that self-to-part relationship, to kind of heal that, and I say this too, it's not something I think we can do by ourselves. Like Ron Kurtz, the Hakomi, the man who sort of developed Hakomi, which IFS takes a lot from Hakomi. He says that, you can't heal you and I can't heal you, but together we create a space where healing occurs. So I think that's a very important, because there is a bit in the kind of IFS literature out there, some around that you should be able to do this work on your own. And there's a certain amount of the work that you can do on your own. But I think healing your exiles, I haven't been able to heal my own exiles. I go to someone that's a healer to create that space for me so I can do my own healing work. So I think it's really important that people really hear that there's not an expectation that you should be able to heal your own exiles. I think, then we get critical of ourselves if we can't. But,
right. Yeah.
But I think we look for someone that's going to be, a redeemer in some way, that's going to redeem our self-worth, or that's going to complete that unfinished business that we didn't have growing up, and we find people that have potential to that. Potential isn't really actuality,
Well, potential just leads to like disappointment and frustration and.
Yeah. At least hopefully we're all, hiring people with potential.
Right. Yeah. Well, and if you work with people with trauma, then you know that you're dealing with parts that have attachment wounds all the time.
Yeah, I think we're all working around with attachment wounds. I think because we've gotten disengaged, we've gotten disconnected from ourselves. We've gotten, most people walk around with some type of harshness, trying to mitigate their internal system. That's an attachment wound. Parts separating from other parts are attachment wounds. So I think attachment applies to our own internal system, and I think IFS is a way of healing internally attachment, so we're reattaching to parts of ourselves, and we're forming more secure attachment with ourselves, so I think it applies. I think IFS is really attachment work, in that we're reattaching to these parts of ourselves that we've gotten detached from, and we're forming, we're sort of meant to have a more harmonious system, and we've gotten more disengaged from that. And you can see that in the way that we are in the world, the way that we are with the planet, with the way that we're disconnected from nature, that this disconnection is sort of showing up everywhere. So, it's, we weren't sort of meant to live like that. I don't think. I think we're meant to live in a connective community and more harmonious with ourselves and more harmonious with nature. And, so we've gotten away from that.
That was beautiful. You said that beautifully.
Thank you.
So, I don't have to run, but if you have to run at 10, I said it would be an hour. So we have about 8 minutes left. So I just want to check in. What do you feel like you want to cover more? What is it that we haven't said that you feel like you really want listeners to hear?
I think the tendency, and I sort of look at the work and I look at the literature a bit that comes out. I think the tendency a little bit is to try to think of parts as stagnant, that we have sort of this part that has this characteristic or this character form. And I like to teach that parts are much more fluid. Our brain is fluid. There's a lot of plasticity of the brain. Parts are kind of like that too. Parts really have potential to transform and change, and so they're not stagnant. So if we make a part like this is my manager or this is my firefighter, and we form it, we may need to kind of have a bit of a particle to it to begin to work with it. But I think it's really important for people to see parts much more fluid, much more, able to shift and change and become, kind of what they were born to be. I think overall as a culture, we're starting to see that people are much more fluid, and much less static. Even the way that we begin to look at gender and and sexual identity, those sorts of things, that there's much more fluidity to a range of adaptability and range of expressions. So it's important to allow that same freedom for your parts to be able to shift and change and transform into kind of what they're meant to be. I think it's important for IFS therapists to see parts in that way, because once we sort of see, if we see a critical part as the critical part, and we make it into the critical part, and we make it to a certain critical part, then we put it in a static form, and we don't really hold the perspective and potential that maybe this part doesn't want to be critical at all. Maybe what it really wants to be is our internal advocate, or our champion, or our nurturer, we want to create space for that part to transform into the way it wants to be. So that's a little bit of my soapbox on really making sure that people that are doing IFS work really sees the full spectrum of what the potential transformation of the system and transformation of parts, can become, so try not to put them into static particles, they're much more adaptable and there's much more plasticity in the brain than these kind of frozen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I love that, hearing it from you, because I know you're like on the front lines of like what we're training people now, and what I know the level 2 that I did, I think you rewrote you and I think someone else rewrote the deepening and expanding level 2. So I know you're on the front lines of like what are people being trained at, and what's the feedback that you're getting, and what are people not picking up? And
I try to keep, Facebook helps a lot. I read a lot of the posts, and I'm also very proud of the consistency I see across the board on a lot of the chats. That people really get the model, and they really give good advice to each other. And so I'm happy. I think that overall that we've done a good job in the last 20 years of training the model consistently, because I see the reflections back are very congruent, with the way that we learned the model, the way it was originally written, and the way it's in it. I think we've got enough time that we're kind of seeing it's a lot of these principles are standing up. They're not going away, and I think there's a lot of consistency and sort of proof in that. And I just saw a client this morning, and it's a guy that hasn't done a lot of therapy, and he said, I can't believe how well you get my system, and he said, I didn't think anyone understood me as a musician, and really it wasn't really me getting his system. It was, we have learned a little bit of how these systems operate, and human systems operate. And so it was really just sort of reflecting back kind of how we know these systems work, but to kind of have, to kind of have that feeling that someone sees us and gets us, and that's a hallmark of attachment. And attachment is we want to be seen, we want to be understood, and we want to be valued. And, and that's kind of what we're doing. And when we're befriending our parts, is we're seeing them, we're listening to them, we're understanding them, we're valuing them. So we're doing internal attachment work, and that's what we want in our external attachments too, is be seen, valued, and understood. So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Anything else you can think of? That was great, Chris.
All things. No, I think it's great to have you said before, it is great to have a career that you still feel enlivened with, and I think the work is, pretty excited to do the work every day because it's a new discovery. It's like visiting a whole new planet, and so the therapy gets really, stays enlivened and stays exciting to get to know people's systems and get to know how they want to change and transform. So,
Yeah, that's totally different than where you were before in that burnout.
Completely, totally different. Yeah. I was trying to manage the world, from where I was before. So.
Yeah. So I always ask at the end, if you weren't doing all the stuff that you're doing, what would you be doing instead?
Oh, I could probably play tennis 6 days a week.
Do you do you come off the mountain to play tennis, or do you have?
Yeah, no, I don't have it on the mountain. I have to come off the mountain, but yeah, my perfect day is, play tennis all morning, have a really great lunch, take a nap, and then go to dinner, and then sit by the fire, with the family and read. So that's a pretty perfect day. So
sounds really good.
Yeah. So if I could do that every day, I would. But there's still lots of work to do. We all have we have our contribution to make, and and so the world needs us to do that. So
that's great, Chris.
All right.
Thank you for doing this. It was great.
My pleasure. It was fun.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, like, all the things. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or all the places books are available. You can also visit my website, tammysalenberger.com, where you can download a free meditation on getting to know your should parts. There's parts of you who remind you of what you should be doing. They sound a bit critical at times. Yes, we all have them. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and Twitter and the One Inside Facebook page. I'm so grateful for Jack Reardon, who created the new music. Jack is a graduate of Derek Scott's IFS Stepping Stone program. Thanks, Jack, for getting me. And to you, thanks for listening.